Testing. All right. Looks like I'm live again. This makes 2 in a row. That's like a record. It's a new record for me for this new bout of lives. And just as a side note, because I know everybody's probably wondering, since there's 2 people that might see this, I don't wear the same thing every day. I do have some other clothes, but actually I do pretty much wear the same thing every day because I pretty much have dance every day or rehearsal or something, and I pretty much have the same thing that I wear to that. So I came home tonight after class and rehearsal to do this before I go to the gym and stretch and do my sauna recovery time, because if I do that first, I'm pretty wiped out. And I don't really like doing the episodes after that. I'm ready for bed after that. If you want a really good something to do before bed, stretch and sauna. And if you don't have a sauna, then stretching works really, really well. I should add that to my book. I don't know if that's in there. I think it is. I'll have to go look. Anyways, Travis Lofka here again. And we'll get into what this is actually about in about 3 minutes after I get done doing Random Squared, because why not do Random Squared and talk about some odd national holidays whilst we doth wait for the other peoples of the interwebs to collaborate into a cohesive form during this Facebook Live, YouTube Live thing that I have going on here. And as a side note also on Random Squared, I'm going to be modifying that slightly because I'm finding the national holiday thing to be a little boring, honestly. And I'm also missing holidays. I'll be like, tomorrow's big holidays are, and then tomorrow comes and it's like I missed International Dance Day. And that's something I do. How is that possible? I don't know, but I missed it. I think that was just the other day or something. So we'll go through it tonight. Stay tuned in the future for a new improved Random Squared to kill the first 3 or so minutes of the Human Upgrade Project show so that people can come on and see what's happening. So tonight's Random Squared. Where am I at here on my list? I went too far down. There we go. Tomorrow, September 26th, right? Yep. Is National Dumpling Day. Pretty excited about this one. I don't know where to get dumplings, but I may have to look for some because I love dumplings. There's so many different kinds of dumplings that you can have, right? There's a dumpling style thing that they have in Mongolia that's really, really good called boats. Sounds like boats, right? Like I'm on a boat. But it's not spelled like that. And it usually has mutton in it, which sort of an acquired taste, very strong. Not a big fan of mutton after a year and a half of that. But it's not terrible all the time, every day, always. So there are times when it is really good. Anyways, dumplings. They have many different kinds. So have a dumpling tomorrow and enjoy National Dumpling Day. The other one is National Good Neighbor Day. Bake some cookies for a neighbor, because why not? So if any of my neighbors see this, please bring me some cookies. That would be awesome. Chocolate chip, preferably, no nuts. I'm not allergic, because I'm not allergic to anything. But I just don't like nuts. You can put nuts on the side. I'll eat those. Just don't put nuts in desserts. I guess it's okay on banana bread. Anyways, before I get off on a tangent, let's finish this off. The third one that I found a huge list of these, and I'm not going to go through all of them, but I found one that was really fascinating because it's very relevant to the Human Upgrade Project, actually, and that is National Situational Awareness Day. Tomorrow is National Situational Awareness Day. And if you don't know what situational awareness is basically being aware of the situation, processing the information that's going on around you externally, it's like external awareness. Think of it that way. You have internal awareness, what's happening with you and your mind, your body, and everything else. And you have external awareness, what's going on around you, and how are you processing that? And based on what's going on around you, what are the events that are going to transpire because of those events? Right? So, I have messages going off here. So, that one will be fun to do. I actually have a course on that. I'll get to that later. Anyways, not on situational awareness, it's something else, but pay attention tomorrow when you're doing things around the things that are going on around you. And that's one thing. Look at what's happening and just anticipate what's going to happen from the action that's going on over across the street, or over somebody working out at the gym, or somebody at a coffee shop, or whatever. If you're situationally aware of things that are going on around you, well, you could be safer for one. I mean, if you're walking around at night and you're used to being aware of what's happening around you, you're not going to get sneaked up upon. Proper English is always important, so make sure you use proper English all the time. Sneaked up upon. And with that said, let's dive right in here, because I'm way over my 3-minute limit. But situational awareness is really, really cool, and I probably am going to do an entire episode on it at some point, because it's that cool and it is that beneficial to know what's happening around you at all times. And the better you get at it, the better you can become at understanding your internal awareness and how you interact with the external environment and the situations. So with that said, official start. Travis Lockyer here with the Human Upgrade Project, where we dissect, deconstruct, and just basically try to figure out, and do figure out, what makes people extraordinary and remarkable. And not to a point that we have to dig into a ton of scientific data, even though I love scientific data, but to a point that anyone can use it. I love science, and I love standard operating procedures and protocols and all of that kind of stuff. And I use it a lot. However, I'm not a scientist and I'm not a doctor, and I don't know in detail all of that information. I was listening to a podcast tonight about some stuff that had to do with stability and mobility as it pertains to training and health and fitness and all of that, and well-being and athletes. And I was like, I've been talking about this for years, but I'm not a doctor. I don't even play one on TV or on here on the internet. So I don't understand all the biomechanics and all of the processes and everything that happens to make those things work together. I just understand what works, right? It takes a lot less time. I don't have to spend 4, 5, 10, whatever years in school getting a doctorate, although it would be really fascinating. I've thought about going back to learn some of this stuff because I love it. But it's more about just figuring out what works for you and becoming as remarkable and extraordinary as you possibly can without needing to become a doctor or a scientist. Yeah. So tonight's episode number 34, number 35. I can't even keep track of these. Double digits. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. Just because you can do something doesn't mean you should do something. Where did this title come from? So, if you've been following along at all, I have a burp coming. I'll make it quiet, I promise. Okay. It's not. I'll hold it down. So if you've been following along at all, you know that I am big on recovery and in every aspect, not just because of training and I'm an athlete and all that kind of stuff. I'm big on recovery because it's important for anything you do. And there was a time recently, a couple months ago, I think it was, a month and a half ago, I was doing some work at a coffee shop here in town, 24-hour place, that I like to go to sometime, and it was really late, and I was for some reason, I was tweaking some things in my book on sleep and came across this article with a doctor talking about some scientific information and all of that, but he ended with a little blurb about when he was in college and how he used to pull all-nighters to study. And it's scientifically proven that, 99% of the time or whatever, sleep deprivation makes you stupid. That's the easy way to put it, right? I have documented evidence that, like, in my case, sometimes that's not true, but I think it's because of adrenaline or whatever. I don't know. I'm going to have a sleep study done and I'm going to figure this out. But yes, it does eventually become an idiot. And it doesn't help at all to stay up all night. Anyways, he was talking about that. And his final quote of this little interview, of this article, was he used to do all this staying up all night and studying, and he got through school and all of that. He probably could have done a lot better if he had maintained a normal sleep cycle and everything. And he said, just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. Just because you can stay up all night doesn't mean you should. Just because you can drink a whole bottle of whiskey doesn't mean you should. Just because you can do whatever, eat an entire large pizza, doesn't mean you should. And so that made me think a lot about some of the things that I do, and it made me more aware of the things that I do, even though I feel like I'm pretty aware of a lot of the stuff that's going on with myself most of the time. And ironically, that night, I was actually planning on staying up all night. So I was in a rhythm. I get in a rhythm, I start flowing, I get in a flow, and I am just like on fire, and I don't want to stop. That's the problem. But that reminded me that we do need to actually stop and recharge and recover from time to time, like every day. Ugh, so annoying. So next time you do anything, it comes down to anything. Whether you're saying yes to something or no to something, or agreeing to whatever, either with somebody else or with yourself, just because you can doesn't mean you should. Just because you can say, no, I don't want to do that, or just because you can say, yes, I want to do that, and it doesn't matter if you're talking to yourself or not, doesn't mean you always should. You need to evaluate the consequences of that and know what is going to occur. One thing that's made it very relevant for me and very front of mind is the fact that now I do a lot of dance and have a lot of rehearsals and things like that. So I basically have other people counting on me to do and perform at a certain level. With powerlifting and things like that, it's just me, myself, and I. If I pull an all-nighter and I go train, actually I've had my best training sessions after pulling an all-nighter, so. But there's actually some evidence to prove that in strength sports specifically, I should find this. I'll have to see if I can find this study. There was a study done that said in strength sports specifically, they studied strength athletes and endurance athletes, and they basically sleep deprived them and then tested them athletically after the sleep deprivation. Strength athletes had no discernible decrease in performance. Some, and like myself, I actually sometimes perform better after pulling an all-nighter in powerlifting. The endurance athletes, however, crash, burn. They did terrible, awful results. Not saying you should stay up all night, and I don't anymore. Once in a while I will, but I don't do it as often as I used to. And that night that I found that article that said, just because you can doesn't mean you should, I actually wrapped up what I was doing and went begrudgingly home to go to bed. So that's about all. I mean, we got Cherie and Cherie. I want to sing that song every time I hear your name, Cherie. I'm gonna find that. I'm gonna make that when I have you on and we do the interview. I'm gonna have that as the intro to the to the show. If you like that song, I don't know. What's up, Mike? So, boy, I don't know how is clarify that, Mike. How's what possible? Staying up all night and then actually performing better strength wise? I think that might be what you're talking about. How long for stretching, Cherie? Depends. I have like 15-minute versions, 10, 15-minute versions that I can do that relax me enough. If I do a really long stretching session, like half hour, 45 minutes, that really, really wipes me out. But I do a little bit different. I don't just do like a static stretching. I do some PNF, it's called proprioceptive neural. The acronym is crazy. Basically, it's contraction and relaxation of the muscles that you're stretching. But by doing that, it actually is almost like a little workout at the same time. So it would be something to test whether or not static stretching or doing this contraction relaxation would work. But I would say just try some light static stretching beforehand. If you know any yoga, that's always good, right? Yep. Oh, honestly, Mike, I don't remember the details on why that was the case. I believe it has to do with the fact that you're in strength sports, you're just using a very minute amount of time, right? So when I go do a set of squats, even if I'm there, like I'd stay up all night and I'd go train for 2 or 3 hours in the morning. But my 2 or 3 hours of training wasn't 2 or 3 hours solid of training. It was like squat for 3 or 5 reps and then sit around and rest for 5 minutes, sometimes 10 minutes. So it's very short bursts of energy that I was using versus sustained energy that was needed, like in endurance sports. And I'm not sure the level of the athletes, honestly, in this study. I'll have to see. I know where that was. I'll have to see if I can find it, because it was very interesting, only because I've experienced it myself, that somebody actually had done a study on it. The other thing that I use also, though, is I'm very good at focusing when I need to and turning off any unessential energy expenditure in between sets of what I'm doing when I'm training. I had a time I was down in Texas, and I was down at, what was I doing then? Oh, it was the Paleo FX. I was the assistant director. That was actually really cool. That's a pretty cool event, actually. But when you're putting on a show, or you're putting on an event that big that has like 4,000 people or whatever attending, it's long days. However, I was training at the time. I believe I was training for nationals. So we would work 14, 16 hours, basically standing on your feet all day on concrete. And then I had to go train because I was training for nationals. So I found a place that was open, a Gold's Gym, and I would go train at like 11 o'clock or midnight, and then get like 3 or 4 hours of sleep and go do it all over again. Luckily, that was only for like 3 or 4 or 5 days. It wasn't, and I know my limits and how far I can push that. But while I was there, because of basically, I call it powering down. I power down between sets to conserve energy, and there was this big tire in the corner that you could use for flipping, and I was deadlifting one night. Did a couple sets, and in between sets, I would go sit in this chair in this tire that was leaning up against the wall, and I would literally power down like a robot, just like, and I'd close my eyes and almost like meditate, visualize, whatever, just to conserve energy. But there was one time where I almost, in between sets, I almost fell asleep, or I might have, I don't know. But that's why it's so important to train your mind as well as your body, because your body can go only as far as your mind thinks you can a lot of times. And that's where the limitations come in with a lot of people when they're trying to do certain things. Yes, just because you can't stay up all night doesn't mean you should. Yeah, that's why I ended up. And And that's a good example too. So when I was down in Texas, it was kind of a similar thing, right? Just because I could do it doesn't mean I should have done it. But that was an instance where it was an exception. I made an exception because I knew my limits and how far I could push myself and how well I sleep in the first place and how much sleep I need and meditation and all of that combined with it. And that it was only for a very short period of time. And when I was finished, I knew what to do to recover from that little 5 day, nonstop go, go, go. Okay, I guess I'm not playing the song when Shuri comes on. Which one when your muscles are screaming at you? Which one? Oh, which stretching? Oh, boy. On that, I don't have a specific. Honestly, what I do when I'm super sore, like tonight at ballet, I'm pretty sore from training earlier in the week. I only trained on Sunday and Monday this week because I have a show on Friday, like I was talking about, and I want to make sure that. And I'm not training for any meets or anything, so I don't need to. It's fine if I miss a day. But I've been super sore this week, so I just warm up is the big thing. Like if you did want to stretch, you could just stretch, but I would say do a lot of warm up. Like actually do some exercises. Do some if your legs are super sore, do some lunges. Do some if you're at the gym, leg extensions, leg curls, super lightweight, 20, 30 reps, 2 or 3 sets, just to get it all warmed up really, really good, and then go stretch. I mean, don't get them so like pumped. You're not looking for a pump or anything. You're just looking to get them moving and warm and all that, so that when you do go stretch, they're already activated and you're not just stretching a cold, sore, stiff muscle. Because I've been there too. That's not fun. I'm sure there's probably a technique name for that, but I don't know. That just goes back to the whole part about um, a lot of what I do and what I've done does have science behind it and has some techniques and has all this fancy data and all this stuff, which is really fascinating, and I love to read about it, but I don't clog my brain a lot of times with all of those specific details because I'm not a doctor. I'm not a physical therapist. I'm not a trainer. I'm just results. That's all I care about. If you want results, focus on results. If you want to be a doctor, focus on being a doctor or a scientist or whatever, right? So with that said, I kind of got off on a tangent. I think it all kind of related to the just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. And that sentence in itself is a recap of the entire show, really. Let me just double check on these. Yeah, I love when people leave comments and stuff and ask questions because I can like have a little conversation with everyone. And I totally nailed it at the beginning. I don't think either of you saw this at the beginning, Mike or Shuri. I don't think you saw this, but I actually said something about all 2 people that are going to see this. Man, I'm getting good at this. Next time, 3 people. I would like to have an odd number of people as much as possible, as often as possible, only because I don't like even numbers. And that's just an oddity in itself, probably. So with that said, let me do, no. I did have a little note in here. When should you push your limits? Should you push your limits? How far should you push them? Why should you push them? And that gets into a whole nother thing of just because you can doesn't mean you should, unless, and you have to, that's where the exception to the rule, there's an exception to every rule. But until you really have yourself dialed in, your recovery, your sleep, your everything else, you can't define those rules. So you're playing a game with no rule book, and I hate rules, so you don't need a rule book, but a guideline, a framework, a whatever. And if you haven't defined that framework and defined those guidelines before you try to start making exceptions to certain things, then you're just throwing darts at a board hoping to hit a bullseye. And sometimes you might, most of the time you won't. So, your assignment for tomorrow that will help a little bit with that in determining a little bit more about figuring out your framework and your how far you can push things is the situational awareness day that I mentioned in the beginning. Now, how does that even pertain, right? That has nothing to do with your internal. Actually, it does. Like I said in the beginning, the more you pay attention to external awareness or situational awareness and the things that are going on around you, the more aware you'll be of what's happening inside your mind and body, because it'll make you more aware all the way around. And the more you pay attention, the more you want to pay attention, because you will be fascinated by what you learn when you start watching other people, but not in a creepy way, in a scientific way. So don't come back to me if people call you creepy for watching them and seeing what's going on in the situations around you. And with that said, I'm wrapping it up with that. Have an amazing day, because it's better than the alternative.